just basically want to get to know about your freeze-dried business
Okay.
and a little bit of information for our listeners to promote your brand too, and hopefully be able to get you some more customers.
My name is Cyreen Patton. I own Silver Hills Homestead, formerly known North Idaho Snackables. We opened up in 2017. We originally started because most of my education is in adult mental health and disability, whereas textures are a really big thing. I do a lot of outdoorsy things, including traditional archery, backpacking, and hunting. So I went more for meals as well. Everything that I found in the market had filler, byproducts, essentially things that aren't needed. Whereas when I'm cooking in my kitchen, I can just put that in the freeze dryer and then I have those for my own personal use. So over the last 8 years now, I've developed a couple of different recipes, and I'm actually in the process of releasing 2 more this year.
So we're also curious, what type of freeze dryers are you currently using to produce your candies, fruits, veggies, and meals? And what initially drew you to that specific brand?
So I actually started doing research a couple years prior to actually pulling the trigger on buying a freeze dryer. Currently, I'm running Harvest Right. I will be changing from them though. I have not been the happiest with my current setup, especially since COVID. Um, there's a couple that I'm eyeballing right now, and one of them is a small commercial size.
Mhm.
So,
So speaking of equipment, have you
yes.
encountered any issues or challenges with your current machines during your production process?
Yes. So in the last year, I've gone through 4 pumps. Yeah, at $300 a pop. So I'm not super thrilled, and they don't have rebuild kits for these ones, which is one of the reasons why I'm not super thrilled.
What
And
pumps are you using?
I'm just using the regular ones through Harvest Right. I actually just bought a premium pump, and so I'm trying that one out. Um, but it's definitely a little bit cheaper than a freeze dryer currently. But at 4 of them, I could have already bought a brand new one. So I'm a little bitter with Harvest right now.
Well, I gotta say, a lot of our, I used to be a retailer for them. Yeah, and used to go around fixing machines for them
Hmm.
throughout the US. And my last repair I did was in Denver, and they flat out never even shipped me the condenser to install. So it was just basically fly to Denver and have dinner with my client and then come home.
Yeah.
And then they blamed me for my schedule of, well, you should have waited an extra day or two down there for us to ship you a new one overnight. It's like, it's not how it worked. I give you months of advanced warning that I'm going to be down there on those specific days. The
Yeah.
least you can do is verify that a condenser gets shipped. And then they tried to fight with me about, the initial agreement was that the client would pay for my airfare and my hotel to come down there to repair and replace their condenser and charge
Yeah.
it free on. Well, since no condenser was there, I ethically I can't charge them
No,
for anything, because
that's an
they
out of
didn't
pocket
perform a
expense at that point.
service. And so Harvest Right forced me and gaslit her into essentially paying for over half of everything that, my airfare and my time.
Hmm.
And they wanted to argue with me. I'm still waiting to get paid. So at that point, I was like, you know what? The liability's all on me. I'm doing Harvest Right a favor. I'm not making any money on these warranty repairs. Why am I even dealing with Harvest Right? The amount of people that are having issues with their machines started to become more and more and more apparent
Yeah.
of just how prevalent their builds are breaking down or putting people in positions where their businesses are failing were struggling because of their horrible quality.
People prior to 2019 haven't really had any issues with their machines.
Yeah.
Um, because I have one prior to 2019 and I have one from 2020.
Hmm.
And I have more issues with my 2020 model than I do my 2017 model.
Yeah. When they first started, they were a great company. They created a
Oh, they
quality freeze dryer.
were.
Everything was put together, assembled, and built here in the US. But as soon as they hit that Chinese production, they just started putting in the cheapest parts. For example, the condenser lines that wrap around the drum that cool the cool trap,
Mhm.
there's no protective barrier between those copper lines and that stainless steel drum. And so, inevitably, just due to a natural current that flows through the metal there, you're going to have galvanic corrosion, which creates pinhole leaks in those lines. And that's where their most common leaks are occurring is due to that corrosion and the fact that they kind of smash that copper line to try to get it as flat as possible to that,
Right.
you
So
know,
they actually run it through a machine and reprofile the line. So the cooling line is not circular, it's actually D-shaped. So they flatten one side. So
Mhm.
they stretch the line through the machine and flatten one side. Then they stretch it around the machine. Now you've taken and bent that circle flat, and then you've bent it again. So if you can imagine, you're bending it two directions, wrapping it around the machine, and then they're running a high refrigerant pressure. By profiling the line around the cylinder, you've weakened it to a certain extent. But
Mhm.
when you flatten it into a D shape to get more surface area, now it's so compromised, it's just a guaranteed leak at a certain point.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
Plus,
no way
So
around it.
I I personally haven't had any issues with my copper lines.
mhm.
Um, I have had issues with the pumps. I just recently had issues with my fan.
Mhm.
And getting to that fan is a mess.
Yeah.
Everything is like in transport, having things bolted down is absolutely amazing. But when it comes to maintenance, it is horrendous.
Yeah.
Trying to get to that fan, even just trying to unbolt it to replace it, it's not great.
No, I hear you. And one thing that like Colt touched on and you touched on, and I think Colt has touched on this on other interviews we've done, is those pumps. The reason why they have such a high fail rate is because Harvest Right doesn't have any control over its triple point. And so, or the rise over run rate. And
Hmm.
so it mimics freeze drying, but it's not scientifically accurate to lyophilization. And so, because it mimics freeze drying, it inadvertently, because it doesn't follow a rise over run rate, it
Hmm.
inadvertently vaporizes the chamber. And instead of trying to pull the bonded and non-bonded water out of the food, once it hits vaporization point, it just starts pulling ice out of the cold trap and running that vapor into your pump. And water and that pump does not work.
No.
And that's why they inevitably fail is because Harvest Right has no triple point. Uh,
Yeah, I've had to pull it apart multiple times and scrub it and
yeah.
break
Yeah.
cleaner it
So,
and put it back together.
if you were freeze drying properly, you'd have this nice smooth graph, and then you'd be dry, and then it would just come across. But instead,
It's like
there's looks like
this.
this. It jumps way
Yep.
above that line, and it comes out the whole way up. So it's just shaking all the way up. And every time you hit that peak above that line, your water is now going to the pump, and it's happening. Approximately half of the time you're operating, you're not in the parameters of freeze drying. You're vaporizing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you were to take the amount of water calculated for the food and then calculate how much water comes out of your cold trap, almost half the water is not there. It went to the pump.
Exactly. Okay. Well, let's move on to the next question here, Colt. When you faced those challenges, how has the manufacturer's support been in resolving those issues?
Because it has not been great. No, they don't have rebuild kits for their basic models. I've even looked online. It's It's awful. They have rebuild kits for their premium pumps. But when you're starting out or feeling like you don't have much to go on, it's hard to justify getting a premium pump. They want to get a freeze dryer. And I always tell them, like, hey, it's not just the initial cost, it's the maintenance behind it.
Hmm.
Yes, it is very expensive. And yes, you can always get a good deal on a used one, but you have to look at the long run. Maintenance is expensive, and you don't always have the best guidance. And as much as I do love the Facebook group community when it comes to fixing things and asking problems, a lot of them are regulated by Harvest Right employees. So if you have any issues or any questions or even a comment on someone's post that's even slightly degrading to that company, they'll take it down. It's like, I was just telling you what I'm having an issue with. That these pumps are trash.
There's
They're,
a lot of paid agitators that I found from
yeah.
multiple freeze dryer companies that monitor social media, and they will attack you if you say anything critical to or towards their their brand. And
Mm-hmm.
one thing that I've found is a lot of those people, if you go into like their friends list, you can kind of
See
connect
who's
the
who.
dot to somebody that either holds a patent or initial investor to one of those other companies. So they're not super sneaky about it, but
No.
there's ways to find out. Yeah.
That's one of the issues that I have is I spend my days designing these machines for companies and know the ins and outs completely. And I'll provide perfectly sound scientific data,
Hmm.
and they don't care.
Hmm.
So it can be frustrating like that because I've spent so much time trying to make progress in the industry and now trying to prove theory and show people the work is actually the hardest part,
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
which is just odd.
I just had somebody on social media claim that Colt was paying me thousands and thousands of dollars or something because me and him started this podcast together, and literally neither of us are getting paid at this. We're just trying to bring exposure to the industry and try to help drive innovation and stuff like that. But because I used to be a retailer for Harvest Right, and now I'm critical of Harvest Right. Obviously, my moral ethical code is,
Someone's paying you off.
yeah, exactly. So,
Funny thing is, people don't realize in this industry, ever since I started, I've been paid in peanuts and smiles. I did all of the revisions to make the Stay Fresh extremely stable and a lot better performing than HR. Then I helped design for Cryonaut and put a lot into that system and also with defreeze.
mhm.
And I've never been paid for engineering by anyone.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I don't do it on purpose. I help all of them for free equally.
All right, Colt, you want to do the next one?
Considering growth and scalability, do you have plans to expand your operation in the near future? If so, what's your vision for scaling up? With your diverse product lineup, from treats and snacks to backpacking and camping meals, what would you say are the biggest advantages of freeze drying for your operation?
My biggest advantage. Um, Honestly, the shelf stability part. I like being able to grab my meals and go. Um, my biggest clientele base and family base and friends base is outside. Um, and it's great to have that option versus like, oh man, how am I going to keep all of this cold? I don't want to lug around a freezer or a chest cooler or, just I have a tote. I've got my jet boil, I've got a gallon of water, and we're off.
Hmm.
So it's just the accessibility of things. And then like with the fruits and stuff, I can bring individual packs of oatmeal and put my own fruit in them. You can mix and match and make your own flavors on the go. And that's something that I do tell people. It's like, hey, I've got 17 different kinds of fruits. If you don't like store-bought oatmeal, you can make your raspberries, your blackberries, your blueberries all in one. If you are allergic to one fruit and it's in one that you like, you don't have to put it in there. You can make your own.
And given the popularity of freeze-dried candies lately, how have you adapted your your production and marketing strategies to meet this growing demand?
It's definitely taken off and has been interesting. I do like the candy aspect just
Mhm.
because it is good for people that don't normally eat candy because of the texture. It's too sticky, it's too chewy. Um, it also isn't as messy in back seats. You don't have to worry about it, sticking to the back seat cushion. And I do like that people that have braces can enjoy different treats without worrying about it getting stuck to their braces and ripping brackets and whatnot. And I do sell my fair share of candy. I'm not gonna lie on that one. Outside of the developmental disability and the braces, I don't understand the candy thing. you know,
Mhm.
the practicality behind it.
Mhm.
Um, it's fun seeing what works and what doesn't because there's new candies coming out all the time, and my kids love it. Obviously, they're my taste testers. But I don't know.
Yeah. What would you say is your biggest seller that you do? Is it candy, fruit, or the meals?
It varies depending on what the market is. I would say it's between fruits and candies at most.
Hmm.
And then when I'm at archery tournaments, and events that are more leaned towards the outdoors, it's between fruits and meals.
Considering growth and scalability, do you have plans to expand your operation in the near future? If so, what's your vision for scaling up?
I actually do. I've had a 5-year plan. In the next year or two max, I do. It's kind of secret squirrel, hush hush. So unfortunately, I cannot divulge that, but I will definitely be more mobile.
As you look at scaling, have you considered other freeze dryer brands like the Cryonaut or the defreeze? And what aspects would influence your decision to explore these alternatives?
I actually have been looking in depth over the last year at other freeze dryers. I do like the Idaho one,
The Blue
blue,
Alpine?
but I have been looking at small commercial freeze dryers. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's like a 3 foot by 3 foot.
A larger chamber design. So a larger chamber like
Yes.
industrial size machine.
Yep.
Mhm.
It's
Okay.
a commercial size, industrial size. It's not
Was
super
it
big.
they make
I think
similar
I
sized
think it
machines?
was Wave.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. So Wave makes quite a few different commercial scale machines.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's more than likely one of their models.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't a giant walk-in chamber. I knew that they had those as well.
Mhm.
It was the smallest version of industrial commercial freeze drying.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
believe that machine runs right around 100 pounds per run or
Yeah,
something like.
it's
Yeah.
insane the like demographics that it has.
Oh, one thing I will touch on, and Colt will agree, the Blue Alpine that you had mentioned, they are a very budget-based model. They
Okay.
use parts that Harvest Right had discontinued due to high failure rates. So if you're already having issues with Harvest Right, keep in mind that the parts that Harvest Right discontinued are what Blue Alpine uses in theirs. The only advantage that Blue Alpine has over Harvest Right is they have a much better customer service
Mm.
outside of their machines. And I'll say this for a fact, they used to have a photo of their shop, and in that photo, you could see in the corner their chambers, and all their chambers were stock pots, like cooking stock pots. So
Oh,
they're
okay.
not actually, they're, yeah, they're as, I guess, The
It
easiest
is
way
a
to put it would
paper
be like
thin
the
cylinder.
difference between Coca-Cola and getting
Pasta.
the 25-cent can at Shasta's at Winco. You know what I mean?
So
So,
the reason why I even really considered Blue Alpine
mhm.
is because they're Idaho based and I am Idaho based and I like to support local and Idaho made items, um, especially here in the Silver Valley.
I just hate to see you be in a position where you have a broken machine
Yeah.
just
And
because
put
you're
thousands of
supporting.
dollars into it again,
Yeah,
kind of thing.
Well,
exactly.
not only that, so the Blue Alpine uses a flammable refrigerant called propylene,
Mhm.
and that is not approved for any type of commercial work in the United States. It is absolutely illegal to use that machine in a commercial setting. So you can't go past basically cottage law provisions with that
Yeah.
machine legally.
So just be careful. I know that they are local, but again, a lot of the parts do come from overseas, so they're
Mhm.
just assembled locally. But don't get in a position where you can suffer the consequences of buying a $3,000 paperweight due to failure
Yeah.
rates and stuff like that.
And that's kind of
Um,
how I feel right now with my harvest, right? Because I have one that's down and
mhm,
one that's mostly working at times, but the
mhm.
fan's going out, and I'm like trying to get to the fan without destroying my freeze dryer.
Colt, I think you're up.
Curious, what key features or improvements in freeze dryer technology would make the biggest impact on your daily operation?
For them to actually work properly, do what it needs to do.
Consistency, dependability. Yeah.
Yeah, dependability, consistency. Um, Obviously, cost would be nice. Just, put something in and having it be the exact same amount, the exact same item, and have it end at the exact same time or roughly within like an hour or two
Mhm.
versus like, oh, okay, well, it's been an additional 8 hours. Are we done?
Yeah.
No, we still have that much to go. Okay, this is fine.
If it comes to consistency, with products and turning out exactly the same every single batch, the best machine that I've seen so far as consistency goes, is the defreeze.
I
They
did notice that they're a Canadian company. How does that work currently with
well,
getting
the
parts? Because
parts.
I know that it's affecting a lot of things here,
Mhm,
specifically in the valley, including the mining.
mhm,
Most of the parts that we need are from a Canadian company, and we're having issues getting our hands on them.
mhm,
So I wasn't sure how that would affect coming from Defreeze,
mhm.
because I believe they're a Canadian company as well.
Yeah, they are a Canadian company, but it's not Canadian essentially. Like the condenser is a universal condenser. Different parts involved in the construction of the defreeze are universally found. It's just assembled and manufactured in Canada, but it's the only machine that has protocols in place for local HVAC companies to be able to repair or appliance repair companies to be able to repair on site.
Well,
It,
that's good to know.
and because they have all those protocols in place, part of the problem why appliance repair people don't want to touch freeze dryers is because they can't be insured for their work.
Yeah.
Freeze has found a way to be able to make sure that they're insured when they touch the defreeze. It's designed not to be sent back.
Okay.
And if they need a repart, they can overnight it and they can even set up the appointment for you with a local repair tech. And Colt will elaborate on this. He is actually going to be doing remote monitoring through their cloud system when it goes live to where your machine could be running a batch and but something manipulates the algorithm or causes a flag to pop up on your run, it's going to trigger Colt to go in live and monitor your batch while it's being done and say, oh, shoot, it looks like the number three heating rack is starting to go out. And he will actually order the part for you and have it sent to you before you even know that you have an issue.
Oh,
That's the
wow.
level of customer service that the defreeze is bringing to the game. It's a
Yep.
fantastic machine. It's going to be the only compliant machine on the market as well.
Okay.
So they're using standard like NSF baking trays. You got either the
Mhm.
half baking sheet or the full baker sheet trays that they're using. So you don't have to get some signatory stainless tray that only Harvest Right carries or only Blue Alpine carries. You can go to, the US
Restaurant.
store, yeah, or chef
Okay.
store, whatever, in Coeur d'Alene and pick up trays for your freeze dryer. It's when it
They're
comes
working on
to,
changing the game, it sounds like.
yeah, when it comes to commercial, it's gonna be a game changer. And because it has such control over its rise over run rate and that triple point, every single batch is going to be exactly the same consistency. And they're going to be able to reduce cycle times to the point where you can get twice as much product around, successfully than say your Harvest Right does. Yeah, it's a great machine. I would look into it.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I'll have to. I just know that with Harvest Right, the consistency just isn't there.
Yeah.
Each batch is completely different,
Oh, and
whether
it's
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 the dry
yeah.
time or the actual things itself. Because even like Jolly Ranchers,
Mhm.
that's one. You have to have it on the top shelf or top and second shelf, or it just
Mhm.
doesn't work. And even then, it's not consistent.
Oh, and it can even
So the
vary by
difference
machine.
Mm-hmm.
so the difference in the Harvest Right and other machines in the way that they heat is all the shelves come on at the same time, they all go off. That's not consistent. So with the defreeze, it's actually completely independent for every tray. So
Mhm.
it's pushing heat exactly where it needs to, no more, no less, and it's always on. You're not going on, off, on, off.
Yeah.
It's just on and slowly walking up that perfect graph is what makes the difference.
Could you share some insights or advice for other small businesses looking to start or expand their freeze drying operations?
Do your research. You need to look into the companies. You need to look at the bad reviews, not
Hmm.
just the good reviews. Um, just like if you're going to a Chinese restaurant, a 3-star restaurant, it's probably going to be better than a 5-star. You're going
Hmm.
to have locals going there. When it comes to companies, you really have to look. And it's not so much asking the small businesses their opinions, it's asking, I can see the double sword, because you have small businesses that don't want to give you any information.
Hmm.
And then you have the small businesses that give you all of the information. Because I had an issue a few years back, it's been about 6 years now. Um, I had a gal, she was like, oh, I just got one and my grandkids love it. And I'm just trying to get this and this to work. How do you do that? And I was like, well, you need to add some more moisture. You need to have something in there that has moisture in order for it to poof up.
Hmm.
And not even a week later, I see this lady all over Facebook. And like, I live in the Silver Valley, it's a small valley,
Hmm.
um, posting all of these things that she has for sale. And come to find out, she didn't even have any grandkids. I'm like, I would have gave you this information either way,
Wow.
but why? I don't like people that lie. Like, I
Yeah.
am the first person to be like, oh, here's all this information.
Mhm.
But it's like wild to me. So when it comes to information, asking people is great, but deep diving is better.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah, freeze drying it's grown to the point now where all the information for candies and recipes and
it's
times
all
and
online. They've got cookbooks for
Mhm.
everything. There was a lady, I went to a market in Oregon a couple years back, and she was selling freeze dried cookbooks.
Mhm.
It was like different recipes for different candy concoctions and how long they work and how much dry time you have to have. I was like, this is insane. Like, I'm not going to spend $60 on a cookbook, especially if I don't know how it's going to work.
Yeah.
Also, I can just test these things out myself.
Really interesting because yeah, I mean, in the reality is, I can have a stay fresh and can write you a freeze drying cookbook.
Mhm.
And if you have a harvest right, you will fail. If I have a cryonaut and you're using a Stay Fresh and you try to use my recipe book from cryonaut, you will fail.
Hmm.
So they're really
Nothing's the
only
same
gearing
across the
them
board.
towards one owner. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
geared towards HR owners otherwise. And in the real fact is if you took those recipes and the suggested times and implemented them in the Stay Fresh or cryonaut or defreeze, you would be wasting your time because it can be done fast.
Yep.
So bring a book for freeze dryers, they may want to say, hey, by the way, it's for this specific machine, not just
Yeah.
anybody, because
Yeah.
you could be wasting half of your time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, these are tested in this machine.
Hmm.
Because again, you have to do your research. You can't just be like, oh, this is what works for me because it's not going to work for the other person.
Yeah.
Also,
Absolutely.
altitudes and things like that. I've noticed that even just rehydrating meals is a big thing when it comes to altitude. I always
Oh,
just tell
totally.
people your best.
And I think a lot of those discrepancies between machines ties into the fact that up until now, with the defreeze being, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm not trying to toot their horn, but it's so easy to because they're the only machine that's scientifically accurate to the lyophilization process. Prior to them, every machine has mimicked the conditions of freeze drying, and they all mimic it differently. And that's why you can't get that consistency from machine to machine to machine. And
Hmm.
what I, as a freeze dry geek, am excited about is now we have something that's scientifically accurate. And I'm hoping that the industry catches on and we start seeing more and more scientifically accurate machines where batches are consistent based upon the dynamics of true lyophilization. So it's an exciting time as innovation has brought us to the point where, the technology is actually becoming scientifically accurate. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, in the home industry,
mhm.
which is, yeah, been a long time coming. With sustainability being a big topic these days, are the practices you've adopted to minimize waste or improve energy efficiency in your freeze drying process?
Yes, I have a couple different things that are set in place to minimize waste. I have the only waste that I can't get past is Mylar bags.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, that's always going to be there. I do use a lot of glass jars, and I have a vacuum sealer that I use.
Mhm.
So when I'm doing bulk runs, if I'm not going to be able to get to it right off the bat, I do have the giant ball or cur jars with
Mhm.
my vacuum seal attachment. So like right now I have a whole jar of veggie mix that I personally use and snack on as well as disperse. And I vacuum seal them that way.
Yes.
Um, but Mylar bags are probably the one thing that you can't really get around. Other than that, everything else I have a sustainable practice for. So,
Yeah, packaging is kind of in the spotlight now when it comes to sustainability.
mhm.
And unfortunately, with freeze dried food, you need that level of protection and a barrier
Yeah,
to be able to prevent atmosphere or moisture from leaking in and saturating the food.
yeah,
And so, sustainable packaging, unfortunately, it's not evolved enough, I don't think, to prevent that from happening to the ingredients inside the bag. So,
yeah.
hopefully packaging and sustainable packaging will, become innovative enough to be able to, catch up to the freeze-dried food industry.
No, that and like my jars are short term, and I
Hmm.
know that, but
Hmm.
it would be really nice for
Yeah.
someone to come up with a long term sustainable bag because that in itself would be a huge game changer,
Hmm.
even just for long term storage.
So there are manufacturers that make, like the company Grove, they make specific types of bags that actually regulate the humidity themselves
Okay.
through the material. Um, but they're not quite yet designed for zero. and the cost per bag would be you'd have to add a lot to the price. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
they're high end specialty bags,
Mhm.
and yeah, they could do it, but you're not going to be able to justify the price of something not high end right now. Hopefully,
Yeah.
they do make like a 0% humidity bag one day, and then they sell so much that they can get cheap enough to where the freeze drying industry, that way you're not there's no oxygen absorbers or anything like that. The bag is self-regulating. I don't think it would take too long, but
Yeah.
yes, the price is a little high
Yeah.
Yeah. With everything that's changing from AI to business to, I can definitely see it happening within the next 10 years, if not sooner, but it definitely would come with a cost.
And that's why natural products or organic products, unfortunately, are higher priced, is because they got to
Hmm.
be able to swallow that cost into how they're sold.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, finally, what's next for Silver Hills Homestead? Are there any exciting new products or innovations you're planning that our listeners should keep an eye out for?
So currently I have huckleberry oatmeal and white chocolate huckleberry oatmeal coming out to a couple of my storefronts. And then we have a secret squirrel situation happening, hopefully within the next year,
Hmm.
where I will be a little more mobile.
Nice.
And my hunting counterparts will be a lot more excited for. I will still have some of my candies, but I
Hmm.
will definitely be like in storefronts.
Hmm.
I'll have some more of my candies and fruits and stuff, but I am over the next year going to be leaning more towards my meals and working with more sustainable practices in preserving foods.
Cool.
I want to get with my local food bank as well. Here in the Silver Valley, we have a very low income populace, which it's everywhere right now with the economy and everything that's going on, but I can only do so much within my own community. So,
Yeah.
um, but I want to get with them and see what we can get together,
Hmm.
even just putting a couple meals in the backpack program we
Hmm.
have with the elementary school. It's called Snack Pack, and
Hmm.
they do it once a month, and people come together and pack backpacks, like lunch bag backpacks for the elementary and middle school for kids that go home and don't have a lot of food. So it helps them and their families be more sustainable and be able to eat during the weekends and on breaks, like spring break right now.
Being able to get into pantries or food banks and stuff like that
Mm-hmm.
with this technology is something that's so underutilized,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, even grocery store donations of food that's about to
Mm-hmm.
expire. Oh my goodness, if we could get that product freeze dried and put in food
Exactly.
banks that way, even if that would be more sustainable than the packaging, being able to completely eliminate food waste with this.
if you're eliminating the waste, you're still
Hmm.
Exactly.
winning by miles.
Well, and that's the thing. It's people throw away so much food
Hmm.
that can be used or saved before it goes bad that once it goes in the garbage and then once it goes into the landfill, all of those greenhouse gases are created.
Hmm.
If we were to freeze dry them before they got to that point,
Hmm.
yes, there's the packaging, but we're also not going to have those emissions. And then it can also be eaten, and then it would help with the lack of food accessibility.
Absolutely.
There's pros and cons to everything, and this is something that I've wanted to do for a while.
Hmm.
And here in the next year or so, I'll actually have the accessibility to do. I want to be able to work with other small farms and the food banks and things like that.
Well, I want to say, thank you for joining our podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I want to mention to our listeners that I want to give you the opportunity to let our listeners know how to find you on social media or on a website or some way where they could order product from you. Do you have that information?
I do. So I am on Facebook and Instagram at Silver Hills Homestead. I am local to the Silver Valley here in North Idaho. There is a storefront in Wallace called North Idaho Unique Creations. It's on Cedar Street. And Eureka Sally's Chocolate and Art Gallery that is on Main Street, I
Hmm.
want to say. Both are in Wallace. I have storefronts at both of them. You can get the majority of my products at the Cedar Street location. I do markets throughout the year, and I also do independent custom orders.
Hmm.
So if you message me, I can let you know what I have, or I can get those going for you. Um, I do free deliveries here in the valley, and if I am in Coeur d'Alene, I can drop off as well. Other than that, it's shipping.
Do you have a website or anything?
I do not currently. I have some things going on this year where I will not be able to upkeep with a website. I did
Oh,
have
okay.
one, but I have shut it down for a little bit.
Okay.
Um, I've got some good things happening this year.
Well, when or if you do scale up and you're interested in the defreeze or possibly buying a defreeze, I know that our podcast does have a code. That'll give you, an extra $25 off of accessories or whatever. It's just the freeze dried guys. 2025, I believe, is what the code is. Reaching out to William and them up there, a great group of people, and they have options to be able to scale the smaller businesses like yourself, including a trade-in, trade-up program. So, like if you started with one of their smaller five half tray machines and you met your capacity needs with that fairly quickly, you could actually trade that machine back in for their five full tray machine and get a substantial discount off of the cost of the five full tray.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, so they're designing those machines to not go into a landfill after 5, 10 years. They're
That
designing
is
them to get,
huge.
yeah, retrofitted back at the factory and sent back out with all new parts. So it's great company. And what we try to tell everybody is, if you want advice on what machine to get, or you want to just double check your research, reach out to me and Colt. We've spent years in this industry, and we can give you the pros and cons of each machine. If people want to feel secure in their purchase as a consumer, having some form of validation on their research, is key to feeling like you got the best value for your dollar. Yeah, and with
Yeah.
these machines being a major purchase for so many people want to feel like they've made the right decision. So,
Yeah, especially for the people that aren't getting one to have
mhm,
a business. They're getting it for their own sustainability.
exactly.
You buy a freeze dryer because you want to downgrade your waste output, when
Mhm.
in fact, sometimes that freeze dryer actually creates more of a problem.
I tell people, Washington, Idaho, and Montana average out to about 7% of the US population. And as a repair tech for HR in North Idaho, it's amazing how many owners would be reaching out to me saying that they have issues and they can't get them resolved with Harvest Right. And it seems like it's above and beyond what the population should justify. So
Hmm.
that shows me that it's more of a prevalent issue than is being really brought to light, or
Yeah.
possibly or potentially, and I know I don't want to say it directly, but could potentially be buried in some of the data. But I do
Well,
know that there are other brands out there, and there's good things about Harvest Red as well, or Blue Alpine as well. Blue Alpine has wonderful customer service.
and
Um,
they're easily accessible, like both
yeah,
of them. That is one thing that I do like is
yeah.
you can go with a Harvest Right and you can get oil or a new freeze dryer same day just walking
Mhm.
into your Tractor Supply. Just because it's easily accessible doesn't mean that it's the best option. And
Yeah.
that's what I've come to learn on that.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Harvest Right, and I say this all the time, is they've done what Band-Aid did. When you grab an adhesive bandage, it could be a generic store brand, but you're still going to call it a Band-Aid.
Hmm.
Harvest Right very successfully did that with freeze dryers,
They
where
did.
people think, oh, I'm going to get a Harvest Right when they hear freeze dryer. Well, Cyrene, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining the podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, and we'll get this posted, and we'll share some links to your Facebook and Instagram page on
Thank
our
you.
Podbean here. And I want to let everyone know that we're found on every single major streaming platform. Just searching for the Freeze Dried Guys, and if you could please like, share, and follow us, it would greatly improve our reach and our ability to get more people involved in the freeze drying community, and be able to help people as well, better understand their machines, and or if they want to start a business like you, be able to understand how the pros and cons of what to do and all that. So thanks again, Cyrene, for being a part of our program. And Colt, do you have anything?
wanted to say thanks for all your input and insights and stuff. Your feel of the industry, and it's always fun to see how different everybody's doing this, but they're still succeeding in their own ways, and they're all happy. So that's the fun in it for us, is seeing people's success and the difference.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, thanks for sharing with us.
Thanks for having me.
No
You guys
problem.
have a great weekend.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks. Bye.